Welcome to It's Not You, It's Grief, a safe space to have candid conversations surrounding the many faces of grief. How do you handle the process while moving forward and ultimately getting back to living in the moment? Come on this journey as we navigate grief through the art of storytelling. And now for your host, Ahira Smith.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of It's Not You, It's Grief. Thank you so much for joining me. I have a phenomenal special guest on tonight's what? Hey, see, this is what we do. But I have a phenomenal person as my guest. This woman here is a mentor. She was a big sister when I was in college in the concert choir. Shout out to Kentucky State University concert choir, CC Love. And she's a minister. She is a mentor. She is a distinguished alumni from the Kentucky State University.
Yes, indeed.
She is a sister. She is an auntie. She is a force to reckon with in terms of her goal and in terms of her journey in regarding her ministry, and especially for her love of God and Christ. But the one accomplished that she is just over the top is that of her family. This woman not only has two beautiful children, but she just recently added the title grandmother.
Yay!
onto her platform. So now she doesn't have just a legacy, she has what's called a lineage.
Yes.
So that's grown. She's grown.
I'm grown now.
She's grown
God.
now. Yes, she's grown. Wait. Don't let the ponytail Father. Fool you. She's grown. You see she whipped that, right?
Don't let it.
But all in all, she is a wonderful person. Her spirit is truly anointed by that of the Father in heaven. And this woman has so many testimonies. I get choked up thinking on how strong she really is, because let me tell you something, she has been through a lot, but guess what? She's still present with us for a reason. And I am just so humbled and honored for her to be on my show tonight. So everybody, please welcome. And I know she doesn't like titles per se, but it's just out of respect. Please welcome Reverend Dr. Angela B. Smith Peoples. Hey, Angie.
Hey, girl. Amen.
You look wonderful. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Now let me just tell everybody, it's been a minute since we've seen each other.
Like literally, I was counting up going.
Yeah, we haven't seen each other
that many years.
It's had to been
okay,
10,
age is
maybe
longer than that.
For us to see in person, I could have sworn I've seen you at a couple of homecomings.
Okay, yeah, homecoming.
We have.
Okay, I was going back to college. Okay,
no, ma'am. No, we can add.
Okay. I was going.
You were going. You were going back to a year that had a 19 in it. No, ma'am. I'm talking about homecomings.
I went back to the 1900s.
Yeah, you went to a 90s.
I did.
I was trying to keep us in the 2. So,
right.
But homecomings, we had homecoming moments.
We did,
But this was a big sister for a lot of us in concert choir, as I mentioned before. And she was a mother figure. She was that auntie. Well, we didn't call her auntie. She was just a big sister for us. But nevertheless, she's a walking testimony on when it comes to faith and gratitude and grace. And she is going to be speaking from a different set of lens when it comes to grief and loss. And this area in which we're looking at is from a support within the family. She has been side by side with her significant other, her husband, Mr. Brian Peoples, who had who unfortunately had lost his parents a few years back. And anytime somebody loses a loved one, but particularly the parents, regardless of the circumstances, is not easy. Let's just be clear about that. It's not even. There are people who are fortunately are watching their loved ones, their elders slowly taking a different turn. But to be a spouse, to see that happening to your husband or your wife or your partner, that's a different type of grief, because you can't necessarily take on that grief for that person. And there really isn't anything you can do other than be there in a supportive manner. And so what I would love for Angie to do is to just kind of share with me and you all as my audience on what that experience was like at the time. And we'll just proceed from there. So Angie, it's all you.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on with you on your podcast. I am so proud of you, and I am so honored to be here with you and for your audience and talking about this topic. Let me situate it a little bit. Brian and I met my freshman year at Kentucky State University. We had been together since January of 1991. I was 18 years old. I was a freshman, he was a senior. I know, right? And we have been together ever since. And
fresh meat. I'm just kidding.
Listen, a hot raggedy mess, but God knew what he was doing.
Don't call him a hot raggedy mess. That's
no,
cold.
I was the hot raggedy mess. Listen, but God saw fit to bless us in the middle of our mess and keep us together all of these years. And so we've been married since 1995. So we've been together for 32 years and we've been married for 28.
Wow.
This past May, we celebrated 28 years of marriage. So we have a long journey of being together and kind of growing up together and knowing each other real, real well. And so I start there with that. I know him real well. Brian's parents died at different times and in very different circumstances. When his father passed first in 2005, January of 2005. Our son, no, it wasn't. Wait a minute, Chris was born in 2004 and he was 2, so it was 2007. Christian was 2 years old and we were in the NICU because he had a tonsillectomy. And in the process of the procedure, he had coded on the operating table. He had a reaction to something, an anesthesia or something, and he died on the table. And so they had to revive him. So we were in the NICU with our infant son. But while we were in the NICU, his father was put on life support. He had been suffering from multiple myeloma, which is a cancer. And he had been suffering for that for a couple of years. And we'd been going down periodically to check on him and see about him and to make sure he was good and to the doctor and all the things. Brian and his father had a very, very close relationship. And so did I enjoyed a very close relationship with his father. And Asia enjoyed a very close relationship with her grandfather. Brian's father called every Friday like clockwork. I mean, every Sunday morning like clockwork, without fail. He did not miss a Sunday. Every Sunday he called, and he always called Brian Bo. And he would say, "Hey, Bo," and he would want to know, where's his big baby, which was Asia. And he would ask about me, and every time I saw him, he wanted to take me shopping, which made Brian jealous. It was a whole thing. It makes him mad to this day. It was a whole thing. But we had a really big bond together. But his father got really, really ill. And so while we were in there with Chris dealing with our infant son and worried about his life and him living, Brian gets a call that says, "You need to come down here and make a decision about your father." because Brian was the executor of his father's stuff,
Estate.
his estate.
Estate.
Brian is one of two children. He's the youngest of two, but he was the one placed in charge of his father's estate.
Oh, wow.
And so he had to leave me in the hospital with Chris and go to Memphis and be with his dad all at the same time. So I don't know if you can imagine the weight of that, of leaving your baby and your wife in a hospital and driving to Memphis to see your father on life support alone. Fortunately, Brian's best friend and our children's godfather, James Price, who also is a K-State alum and was Brian's roommate at Kentucky State, lives in Memphis. Is from Memphis, went back to Memphis after graduation, and he was there, and he was with Brian and able to be with him at the hospital and everything. So we stayed in contact on the phone throughout, and James was with him when the decision time came. And James was the one that was with him when his father took his last breath. I was still in Kentucky with Chris in the NICU. To be distant from him while he was grieving, because the grief didn't start when he took his last breath, right? The grief started dealing with the cancer.
Right.
But when he got put on life support, everything shifted. And I saw a sadness in him that I'd never seen before. Brian's already a man of few words, but he became really quiet and didn't want to talk very much about certain things. It was like pulling teeth. And I had to learn to read the signals and pay attention to the signals and just know how to navigate his needs unspoken without words. And that's why I situated with how long I've been with him. Because had I not had all that time with him, I may not have caught his signals. You know what I mean? They were nonverbal cues to be able to know what he needed, when he just needed me to leave him alone, when he needed me to hold his hand, when he needed to cry and let it out and me tell him it was okay, when he needed a hug and just to be able to break down for a second, because Ryan's a man's man, right? He's a big, burly ex-football playing Q, right? And so he don't cry often. But this is his father. And to have to be the one to make that call took everything in it and everything out of him. And to do it at a time where his wife is in the NICU with his son, it was just additional stress on him at the same time that it was just overwhelming. So I'm eternally grateful that James was by his side, so he didn't have to be alone. His brother, you know, in Christ was with him in that moment. And James kept me on the phone. Even when Brian couldn't speak, James was on the phone with me. And so what we did was the very next day, blessedly, Chris was being released from the NICU. My parents were willing to take him and keep him into their house. And I got Asia and we got in the car. I had had no sleep. I came straight from the NICU, from dropping Chris off, got on the road, and another friend of ours met me, came up from Atlanta. We met in Nashville, and he let me follow him the rest of the way to Memphis. I saw nothing but his taillights the whole way to Memphis. I was dead exhausted. I literally followed taillights at night to get to my husband. But I'm grateful to Leonard Perry for doing that for me. And we got there safely. And we got to him, and he was able to have a quiet moment of breaking down. And it was just the intimacy of holding him and being present with him. There was nothing I was going to say that was going to take away his pain. Because while he's hurting, I'm hurting too. I loved his father as well. And then we have our daughter who adored him as well. And so, having to explain to her what was going on at the same time and navigate her heart as well. And then you have the business of that goes on after somebody passes, and you get in business mode, right? So you're in grief, but you flip immediately into business mode because stuff has to get done, and decisions have to be made, and property and materials have to be divvied up, and ugliness comes out of people, and I mean all the things. And I realized, and I'm grateful for my relationship with Christ, because I realized at that time that my job was to be his place of peace in the midst of chaos, in the midst of everybody else, including family members, creating havoc and hell for him. My job was to create safe space and to be his peace, where he could come and lay his head down and breathe, right? And come and laugh about something, come and find some kind of joy in something in the midst of everything. And that's how we navigated, that time. I sang at his father's funeral, and it was a beautiful homegoing service. And Brian got to see his father used to coach their Pee Wee League, so former little teammates and different people came, and it was a beautiful time, a beautiful family time. And we came back home. But the one thing that we failed at is, and I didn't realize it until his mother passed, and I'll jump back to it in a second, is that when we got back home, we immediately just went back to life. We immediately went back to life. And I never realized it until my daughter pointed it out when his mother passed. Okay. Don't let me forget that point.
Okay.
So now fast forward all these years later to pandemic in 2020. The pandemic hits, and in 2020, everything shut down. Everybody's going crazy. I had COVID early on, and me and my lungs, that's not a good situation. And so I had it bad and was not in a good way or whatever. I was being separated from family and not seeing or touching our parents, and all that kind of stuff was difficult. But we got a call in July, the week leading into Brian's birthday, actually. His birthday is the 24th of July. We got a call the week leading into it, out of the blue, from his brother, in a panic, because the ambulance was taking their mother to the hospital. She wasn't able to breathe, and they were taking her to the hospital. Sure.
Now, if I may ask, where was his mother?
In Atlanta.
Okay.
His parents were separate. They were divorced when he was a child.
Okay.
His father lived in Memphis. His mother lived in Atlanta.
Okay.
And his older brother lived with his mother in Atlanta.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
And so, so he got the call that she was being taken to the hospital. Now, this is the height of COVID, when they didn't know what COVID was. Right. And this is July of 2020. So this is when nobody can go to the hospital to see you. Nobody can be with you. Nothing at all can happen. So everything had to be done via telephone. When I tell you, that was one of the worst weeks I think we've ever gone through, because everything had to be done via phone. It was so many phone calls to different relatives of people just trying to find out what's going on, how is he, back and forth to the hospital with all these different things, because they were putting her on and off the ventilator. She'd be on, and then they take her off, and then they put her back on, then they take her off. And I mean, back and forth, back and forth. The blessing in the midst of is that the last time they took her off the ventilator, was on his birthday, July 24th, 2020. And he was able to talk to her on his birthday and tell her he loved her. She was able to tell her she loved him. She wished him a happy birthday. And they had a wonderful short phone call of love and happy birthday on his birthday, 2020. God was able to give him that gift, because right after that, she went on a ventilator again and never came off. She passed away on the following Tuesday. After that, she was gone. And it was a week of torment, for lack of a better word. I don't know how many of your listeners had to deal with a loved one died during COVID, but those dealing with death during COVID was horrible. Not being able to be by their side, not being able to see them, not being able to comfort them, not anything, not being able to give them a funeral. So not being able to honor them in their death. None of that. So it leaves you with no real closure. It just leaves you. And because of it, everybody was angry and everybody was bitter and nobody liked the situation. And everybody was scattered from each other. So everybody was scared, and it was just, why? Why did this have to happen? Why did it have to be like this? Why, just a whole lot of questions with no answers,
Right.
Feelings with no resolution, all kinds of stuff was going on. And again, death often brings out the worst in us. It really does. And you have to navigate stuff, that might go back 30, 40 years, but it often can bring out the worst in us. And you have to deal with those feelings, and stuff just bubbles to the surface. But here we are in the middle of the pandemic, and the four of us, Brian, me, Asia, and Christian, are stuck in this house because you couldn't go anywhere. You could barely go to the grocery store at that time. Like, the stores were empty. You weren't allowed to go anywhere without a mask. We were masked up. Like, that was the height of the pandemic. So there was no church to go to. There was no stores you could go to. We couldn't go around the corner and see my parents and get comfort. You couldn't go anywhere and do anything. We had each other, and that was it. But the blessing of that is that it, as close as we already always have been, it forced us to talk even more. It forced us to talk about everything even more, to peel back layers to onions that we didn't even know existed, kind of deal. We talked with our children openly and honestly, and always have, but we talked with them openly and honestly about everything that was going on, the whole way that it was going on, because they're young adults now, right? And allowed them, well, Chris was still a teenager, but allowed them to ask any questions that they had, wanted them to share their feelings, not wanting them to hold their feelings or fears or whatever, and me having to help them understand where their place was in comforting their father and where my place was in comforting their father. Because sometimes, like my daughter in particular, she just wants to run in and be the one to hug and, and all that. And sometimes I have to say, this is a mommy moment. This is me and him. I need you to step back for a second. Because this is when he needs mommy right now. You can hug him, that's cool. But right now he needs his wife. Right. He needs his wife right now. This is give us a few minutes,
Right.
and then we'll open the door back up.
Right.
And y'all can come back in the room in a few minutes, but just give us a second to just have a private moment, alone kind of deal. Because there are moments when he needs the kids, because there's a joy that your children bring to you, that, or whatever, that lightness and lightheartedness or whatever.
Mhm.
But there were other moments that he needed his wife,
Right. Right.
because there's just a different level of intimacy
Oh yeah.
and a different cry
Right.
that he can have on my shoulder
Right.
that he would not have with them,
Mhm.
a different depth that it goes to, and that he needed to get out. But the blessing is he did allow his kids for the first time to see him fully vulnerable
Oh wow. Okay.
and fully raw in those moments, because we were in the house together.
Right.
So it was not hidden to them. So they pretty much got to see it all. But the pen goes back to, because we were in the house together, there was no just go back to working, go
Right.
back to life as usual, like nobody just died.
Right.
It was, you're going to sit in this and you're going to deal with this. And so for my daughter, it was not only dealing with the passing of her grandmother, it was also finally fully grieving the passing of her grandfather. Because although we had had his funeral and done all of that, when we came home, we had gone back to work.
Mhm.
And we had not sat in it and processed with her grief. So when we got to this point, it was processing as a family
Mhm.
all of our grief. So as his wife, I was his leaning place and his safe space. And as their mother, I was the facilitator of the family's grief,
Okay. Okay.
if that makes sense.
No, it does. It definitely makes sense. So couple of some of the questions, and I don't want to interrupt, but
Oh,
something
no, you're
that
fine.
I wanted to ask you really quick before you continue on. How old was Asia when her grandfather passed, if you don't mind me asking? Because I know Christian was just out of the INCU
She was
unit.
8.
So okay, so she was 8. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So she definitely
She
knew and
knew
could
him.
understand. Okay, so
Oh,
she
yes.
understood the difference between, like, okay.
Yeah, very much
Okay.
so.
Okay. And so, I know you mentioned that Brian was very close to his father. Was he equally close with his mom as well? And
No.
okay. And so how was that type of dynamic in the grief, just from your lens, on top of the pandemic?
That was part of the difficulty.
Okay.
Brian loved his mom without
Okay.
question,
Mhm.
but they had a contentious relationship.
Okay.
I think distance was a big part of it, because I know she wanted to, see us more often and all of that kind of stuff or whatever, and be involved, in the kids' life more often and everything, and get to know them more often. They lived in Atlanta, we lived in Louisville.
Mhm.
But they're just, personality wise, they were two different people. Brian was more personality wise like his father. His brother was more personality wise like his mother.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was just, they were kind of yin and yang,
Okay.
opposites.
Mhm.
And so it was not always the most healthy kind of relationship. And so that was part of the struggle, because you have to, which is why I'm glad that they had the birthday day moment, right? Because that was the last word that God gave, love.
Right.
When it all came down to it, she was his mother. She loved him. He loved her. She gave him life. And she was able to wish him happy birthday on his birthday, right? And he was able to talk to her and tell her that he loved her and was praying for her. Like, that to me meant more than anything. And I kept kind of bringing that up to him just to remind him of this moment that God gave him in the midst of his grief, that God gave him for him to ever hold on to. That the final word that God gave was this moment of grace and love with him and his mother. You know, like, you can't undo or go back and redo stuff of the past, you know, but you can have solace in that. You can take solace in that moment that God buttoned it up for you in that way and said, my last word is love between the two of you.
Do you feel that if the pandemic did not take place, do you believe that Brian may have still been as open with his grief with you all or his kids versus, before?
No.
Okay.
No, it's not his way.
Okay.
He keeps things to himself. He's a processor, but he's a quiet to himself processor. Like he says, he'll cry if he takes a drive, he'll go for a drive, right?
Okay.
And listen to music and he'll cry, alone or whatever. But he doesn't often allow the kids to see him break down. With me, that's another story.
Right.
Because I'm his wife.
Right.
And that's why I had to tell, my daughter, this is mommy's space right here.
Right.
Mommy lane right here.
Right.
But with the kids, not as open, no. Which is why I was grateful that we were all in that house together and that it was that openness. They needed to see that side of their father. My son needed to see that part of masculinity.
Okay.
Even in pain. Right? And that it's healthy.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And that it's normal and it's natural to process with your loved one in a safe space.
Right.
That you don't have to hold your grief and hold your anger.
Right.
But that you can, with your loved one in a safe space, you can let it out and get it out. And you can break down. And you don't have to be the strong one. You don't have to be tough. You don't have to be hard. You can have a broken moment and it's all right. It's fully all right.
What? Okay. I'm making sure I'm wording this properly. From your set of lens, what do you think the experience of losing his father in 2004 taught him versus him losing his mother in 2020? What do you think those two experiences had taught him from your perspective? And what did it teach you as a supporting wife?
Gracious. Well, like I said, the first thing that I know that it taught me is how to see him, even in his quietness, how to read his nonverbal cues and know what he needs in that moment, whether he needs to be alone or he needs me to kind of push for a second and get him to talk, or he just needs a hug, or he just needs me to quietly hold his hand, or he needs a laugh. But it taught me to really see him in his quietness and not just allow him to go shut the door and be quiet, but to be present with him and see him when I'm present. I think sometimes that we can be in the same space with people and not see them.
Yeah.
And it really taught me how to see him. And so I can see him every day. From then on, I've been able to see him. And I know him like a book. So I know when he's hurting, even when he doesn't say it. I know it physically or emotionally. I know when he's stressed. I know when he, you know what I mean? Because I see him.
Right.
So I know from me, it taught me how to see him, and it taught me how to be there the way he needed and not the way I felt like I should be.
Got you.
Because sometimes the way I felt like I should be was overwhelming to him. And it
Okay.
wasn't what he needed.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, you know, I'm all dramatic, right? I'm oh, yeah. And he's all like, yeah, babe, I don't even want to talk right. Like, I'm not, I don't even, can we just be quiet for a minute?
Kind of gave you that side eye, like, what is she
Yeah.
doing? I
mean, he
like,
just really will be like, babe,
seriously.
Yeah.
You're embarrassing me.
He will never say I'm embarrassing him. He will never do that.
Well, that's good.
But he will just be like, he will literally just say, babe. And just look at me. And just literally just look at me and let it hang. And then I'm going, oh, okay.
Give you that look like only you and him.
Yeah.
I'll be like,
yeah. And I'll say, oh, too much. Too much.
You like pull it back, like, okay.
Right. Okay. I'm clear. You know. And so no, I know, you know, when to pull back and when to move forward. And so and how to be what he needs when he needs me to be what he needs me to be in those moments. As far as what it taught him, let me throw this in the midst.
Okay.
In between the two. And this is going to really trip you out probably. Because it's not apparent, but it's kind of apparent. So his father it was January of 2007.
Okay.
Because Chris was born in 2004. So the surgery was, he was turned 2 in 2006. So it was January of 2007 was when was his funeral that first week. It was his father's birthday week, actually. Which is always a hard week for him still to this day. In between, though, his father passing and his mother passing, Brian had a boss at U of L that he adored named Kathy, who was like a mother figure to him. She worked in office right next to him for years. She was his supervisor. She was the registrar at U of L. He adored her. She adored him. He was her driver. He drove her home, picked her up from work, drove her home every day for a long time because she was disabled, couldn't drive. After years or whatever, she got sick. And so he began to, you know, pick her up, take her home every day and all that kind of stuff. Her and her sister. He loved her. And one day, she coded in the back seat of our truck while he was driving her home. And he had to pull over and render CPR and call the police and come and get her. But she passed. So when I say layers of tragedy on his heart, layers of parental loss and pain on that he carries, right? He did his best to revive her and he couldn't. But so when you say, what did his father's going through that, what did it teach him? His fathers prepared him to deal with Kathy. And I think Kathy's prepared him to deal with his moms. And I literally just linked that together in the last 5 minutes, but seriously, They're not in here, so they haven't even heard me say that. But I just linked that together in the last 5 seconds. That perhaps it is because he as painful a loss as his father was,
Mm-hmm.
he knew that his father had lived a well-lived life,
Mm-hmm.
and was happy and well-loved and strong. And, he just misses him immensely. And still on Sundays, sometimes looks for that phone call and all of that. But it was a not a long decline, but a long decline. So he had time to kind of get his mind ready before he ended up on life support, and then it became quick. Kathy's was a sudden shock. He navigated that, but then again, that was another situation. He went through that and had to what? Immediately go back to work.
Back to work. Yeah.
Right. And just keep going because he had a job to do. I think they let him take a couple of days off. The office did. They let him, the university, they let him take a couple of days off. Because they all knew that Kathy thought of him like a son.
Right.
They knew how close he was to her. But a couple of days does not grief. That doesn't amend your grief at all. Yeah, and you're still going back to the same office that's right next to
her.
Yeah. And already when you go back, they trying to move offices, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, just life's still going on,
Life goes on. Right. So it's the navigating of those things. So again, what's my role? Peace. When you come home into this place, that's why my goal is to make sure my house stays a place of peace. My house stays prayed over. It stays calm as I can have it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like chaos in my house. I don't let everybody in my house. And I don't have some, 1,000-foot jumbo house or whatever, but my house is peaceful.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
God resides here. Peace resides here.
Right.
Love resides here. Right. And just everything can walk through the doors of this place because I take care of who's up in here.
Right.
And so what's going to be in here is going to be peace and godly and love.
Right.
Because I got to make sure that they're good.
Right.
Because the same way that Brian is the head of our household, but I cover him.
Mm-hmm.
He covers me, but I cover him.
That's the covenant y'all made with each other.
It's the covenant we made with each other. Mm-hmm. And you best believe I'm going to make sure he's good. And protected and safe and all right at all times.
That's essential. That is so essential. And I think I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to say thank you so much for putting that out there, because when people are grieving, whether it's, like you said, it's your husband and this is the covenant that you all made, you'd be surprised. And then again, maybe not because of what you have witnessed or what you might have seen in other families. You'd be surprised how people aren't being covered when they're grieving.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like you said earlier, and I've told people multiple times, and this from your own ministry and just from what we've been through, you ever really want to know a person's true nature, let a death occur.
Yes.
You see all types of walks of life.
Yes, indeed.
And what's so painful is that it's even within your own kin.
Yes, indeed.
That's the one that's so troubling. Like this is your flesh and blood. Yes, but yet indeed. This is what you are inquiring about this while this person's in a coma. You're inquiring about this as they're on their way to the hospital.
Girl, I could tell you stories, but I can't tell you stories.
We okay, but we
not on this platform. Wait till we get off.
Oh yeah, no ma'am. We go so much time, but but this again, this is a teachable moment, because we just don't understand. There are so many layers to this.
Yeah.
It's not, we have to change the narrative. We have to change the discussion about grief and what it is today. Because even though our ancestors, our elders always told us way back when, oh, just take it to the Lord, leave it at the altar, and that's it. Or, if you flip it on like the professional side, okay, you got 3 days of grieving and then that's it.
Right.
That's still going on, even when everything was happening with Brian's colleague. And you may have been changing the paint or getting the desk cleared, you're still grieving. Even if the mound is still fresh, you're still grieving. Even if you remember the last words that have been said in your ear before everything else, you're still grieving. There's so many layers to it that, with and this is just from what I'm hearing from you, there was multiple times where he had delayed grief. His grief was delayed because of everything that was going on from, with his father and, you and Christian. It was there was grief with that situation before he even got to Memphis to see his day. That was a delayed grief. And then you had the father situation. Let's fast forward. Let's move up a couple of years. Then you have a situation where you got this colleague, you're great, and other things are happening, life still happening. You driving on the road, then something in the back, your grief is delayed because you had an emergency situation. You have to make calls and do all that. Fast forward to the pandemic, where the entire world was shut down. It wasn't just Louisville, Kentucky. It wasn't Atlanta. It was the whole world. And like you said earlier, people who were losing loved ones at that time, you couldn't celebrate or do their homegoings in the traditional sense, especially in our community. You couldn't be at the hospital. Only you would be lucky to have one person in there. Zero. Just depending on where you were at the time, because cities like New York ain't nobody getting in there, or Atlanta. So again, you're dealing with all of this being away. And again, another delayed grief. In regards to, the on top of the secondary losses, secondary losses of grief are like, well, I miss the opportunity to talk to my mom, or I'm missing those calls from my dad, or I'm missing the opportunity to give my colleague. All those secondary losses are griefs on top of that. So it's just building and building. And I want this platform to continue to educate us that there's so many layers to this, that again, there's no blueprint to this. The way that you were able to know your husband, to cover him in a proper manner with love that clearly was bestowed upon you through God, being able to know and read the signs of what was needed at that time. Not too many people, you and I both know people who've been together for decades and they still don't know each other in the own family.
True. But I want to add to that.
Go ahead.
This additional, because I think it just now this year, or let's see. I've shared with you, privately, my dad's stroke situation back in November of last year. It just recently dawned on Brian, that both of his parents are gone now. Like he lost one at a time, years apart from each other. It just recently dawned on him that both of my parents are gone. Like sitting in that space. It's not just my father anymore.
Right.
And it's not just, I just lost my mother, because for
Right.
a minute it was, my mother just passed, right?
Right.
That was the language.
Right.
My mother just passed. My mother passed in July.
Right.
My mother just passed. Now it's, both my parents are gone.
Yeah.
That's a whole different shift
Yes.
and a whole different settling in himself that he's got to do now, that he's not fully settled into yet,
Mm-hmm.
of that space of going. It was almost like oh crap, wait a minute, both my parents are gone now. That realization, that dawning,
That
kind of,
narrative changed.
the narrative has
Narrative
changed.
changed.
And it just recently kind of clicked,
Mm.
and so when my dad had his strokes, and it was tentative on if he was even going to live,
Mm-hmm.
to see December or
Mm-hmm.
not,
Mm-hmm.
he took it harder than
Mm.
even I was taking it.
Mm.
And I was looking at him like he was I'm going, help me, right
Right.
now. Like, I'm trying to hold mama together and my siblings and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I'm going, what are you you're supposed to be helping me, help me.
Right.
But then we had a time of family prayer, me, him, and the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was either Christmas or New Year's. We always give our thanks and what we're praying for or whatever. And of course we were thanking God that my father just had lived.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not the same, but he's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
But his was, y'all don't know what I know, and had he lost, because when his father died, my dad became his dad.
Understood.
And so it was, had he lost yet another, he just couldn't take it right now. And I had to go, as much as I was feeling. Once again, it's that back burner moment of going, let me shift me to the side for a second, because I got to look at my husband and go, okay, he needs me again. I got to see again, right? Let me pay attention, because it came with full, raw honesty and tears of, I can't lose him too. And the pain of even the potentiality of that. And so I'm grateful God's given us some extended time with my father to allow all of us to, kind of come to terms with where we are with him even right now. But yeah, he's had a lot built onto that. Right before Chris was born, we had come off of miscarriages, one that almost killed me. It's been layers of grief. And I don't think he ever really, I think he stuffed. I think as men do.
He suppressed it.
He suppressed.
He suppressed it.
And suppressed and suppressed. Just like when he's angry, he has a long wit. And he does.
No, I believe it.
My fuse is short. I'm short and I'm a loud pop.
I think it's a Smith thing. I really do think. I think it's a Smith thing.
That our wits are short. It may be.
I think so.
Because I'm like, I don't have the patience. I don't have it. I don't have a long wit. Brian's he's got a slow burn, but when he burns, it's gonna go kaboom. And you don't want it. You don't want it to burn out, because you don't want to see what that looks like.
Yeah.
And because when it goes kaboom, it goes off the rails kaboom.
Yeah.
And that's what, like, which is why I had to really see and really pray, because I have to help him navigate that so that there's no kaboom. So I have to be the reservoir. I've got to be the safe space.
Right.
I've got to be that place that directs him back to, I'm going to need you to pray about this, babe. Come on, let's pray. I need you to pray about this. Have you prayed about this? You know what I mean? Or talk to me. What's going on? Whatever. Because I can't have him go boom.
Right.
And I think that suppressing, that's health challenges. I believe that now.
Oh, absolutely.
It manifests in your health,
Oh, yeah.
in your body in all kind of ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, and this is just my observation based off my experience, I know for me, when again, when I lost my dad, everything that had been suppressed to that point was no longer suppressed. It erupted. It erupted.
Yeah.
And I can just tell for me, and that again, that was in 2018. So when this pandemic hit, I saw so many explosions. It was like nothing was suppressed for so many people. Things that had been suppressed for 20, 30, 40 years.
Yes.
No longer. It was like in your face. Just like you said, when everything was happening, you were going to be in it.
Yeah.
And deal with it.
Yeah.
You could no longer suppress it.
Yeah.
And so one of my last few questions that I have with you is, what did your faith teach you when it came to grief? What has it taught you in terms of grief?
My mind, I'm so much like my mother, it's ridiculous. My mind always goes to songs.
Okay.
She's got songs for every occasion. My mother sings a song for everything. But no, my faith is that God is. Period. Full stop. He is. God is. And so I trust that God knows where we are in every moment, that God knows our brokenness. I trust that there's purpose in it. Even when we can't see the purpose in it, even when we don't like it, I really trust that God is working it out for my good. I really honestly do. It doesn't mean that we won't feel it, but even in loss, the Bible says that we don't mourn as those who don't have hope. I'm not hopeless. I'm not despondent.
Mm-hmm.
Am I upset? Yeah. Am I crushed? Yeah. But I'm not destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because my faith is unwavering. God still is. At the end of the day, for us, if he was in here, he'd say the same thing for us. At the end of the day, for us, it's him. We trust him. We believe in him. And when we don't know any other way, and when we don't know anything else, we know that God does. Mm-hmm. And we just have to believe that God knows what God's doing in our lives, because we've tried it our way and we messed the thing up. So we just choose to try it. We choose to try it is. Oh, right. Yeah. We've tried it many times to do it our own way, and we messed it up a few. Yeah. So
it don't work.
It really doesn't.
It's like, you ever want to make God laugh, have a plan, like,
seriously,
try again. It'd be like,
but in the midst of grief, God really knows how to bring peace in crazy situations. You can be in the midst of it and not be crazy. Like, you can be in the midst of craziness and not be crazy.
Yeah.
You can be in the midst of pain and find a way to smile. Like, you can be in the midst of heartache and tears, and light will shine. Just glimmers of hope will come if you just hold on. Like, but there's a song out now, and my daughter loves it, Ty Tribbett, and I love Ty Tribbett. But he's got this, weeping may endure for a night, but only one night though. And I said, you know what? Here's my thing with that. Nighttime sometimes is a season.
Isn't it?
Sometimes it's a season.
Mm-hmm.
It ain't just one night.
No.
Sometimes weeping endures for a season.
Season.
Nighttime is a season.
Yeah.
Joy does come in the morning,
Oh, yeah.
but sometimes nighttime is a season.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can hold on through the season, you'll see the joy in the morning. Mm-hmm. But the only way I've held on through the dark seasons, the only way I know Brian has held on through those dark seasons is because of our faith. Because he still gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning, every morning, and prays before he does anything else. Every morning. I will still roll my eye at him at 5 a.m. because I'm not getting up at 5. Like, thank you for getting up and praying for the family at 5. Mm-hmm. You know, I got you at 2 a.m., but 5, I'm late night. You early morning, I'm late night, you know. But it's the only way that we've gotten through any of the things that we've gotten through is that we really believe what we believe, and we really believe in whom we believe. And it's not just that we believe it, we've tried it and we know it's true. We've been through it and we put it to the test and it worked. Yeah. It's worked for us. He's worked in our favor. He's brought us through. He's given us joy for every sorrow. He has restored our faith when we've been faithless. And he didn't say you got to have tons always. There's a scripture I love, and I'll quote it to him when I'm having those moments. And it's in Mark. It says, Lord, I believe, but help thou mine unbelief. God, I believe you, but there's a part of me that's struggling. Yeah. So help me when I'm weak. Yeah. Help me when I struggle. I believe you, but I'm struggling right now to hold on to that belief. So just help my unbelief. Right. You know, I'm not letting go of your hand, but just help me when I struggle. Right. Yeah.
And you just need it. Doesn't have to be that big, just the faith of a mustard seed.
Mustard seed.
Tiniest thing you.
Tiny. If you've ever seen one, it's tiny.
It's tiny. So tiny.
And that's all it requires.
Oh my goodness. I could talk with you for days, but I know I can't. I know I can't because I'm just happy to be in the glow. I'm glad I'm in
Call me tomorrow, girl. Call me tomorrow.
Listen, I got you. Maybe this may be a continuation part 2. Right. But let me just ask you this one more final question. Okay. For those who are in your role as far as being a supportive spouse, significant other, family member, what maybe 1 or 2 things you would, words of wisdom, knowledge, experience, what would you share with them, in terms of just being there, being present in the moment when their loved one is going through these hard times?
Pray first. Be grounded yourself so that you can approach it from a place of peace and not chaos yourself. Because how are you going to help them if you come in chaos and they're in chaos? So pray first so that you can approach in a place of peace and be the place of peace and comfort that they need in that moment. Right?
Yeah.
So pray first and get in a place of peace first. And then open your eyes and see them. Sit in the room and look at them and see them. Don't just look at them, but see them. See their pain. See where they're really at right now in that moment. Is it anger? Is it hurt? Is it fear? Is it resentment? Is it questions? What is it? Right? Mm-hmm. But be a safe space where they can talk or not talk. Be a safe space if they just want to hold your hand or watch a movie and just be present. You don't have to have the right thing to say. You don't have to say anything at all, because sometimes saying things is the wrong thing. Because in trying to have the right thing to say, you can sometimes say the wrong thing and jack the entire situation up. So don't say anything. If you don't know what to say, don't say nothing. Just be present. You can be honest and say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here and I love you. What do you need from me? How about that? Ask them, what do you need from me? I just want to be here for you. However you need me to show up, whatever you need me to be in this moment, I'm here for you. It requires you to what? Be humble, get over you, and serve your spouse. And if you're married to them, it ought to be automatic, but I digress. It's supposed to be a part of your vows, but I digress. It ought to be what a marriage is about. Husbands, loving your wives as Christ loved the church. And wives, submit to your husband. It's not about the husband being Lord over the wives, but it's about submitting one to the other. You serve me, I serve you. You cover me, I cover you. You got my back, I got your back. You see me, I see you. You meet my needs, I meet your needs. And the needs neither of us can meet, God meets. But I digress.
Hey, so where's the offering plate? Somebody got the basket because somebody got a little change. Somebody got change. I'm like,
girl.
No, listen, Angie. That's why I knew what I was doing intentionally when I'm like, I need Angie on this thing because I knew you would. I knew you had a testimony like no other, and the lens that you were able to show me and my audience of what it means to be supportive in the midst of a storm.
Yeah, we've been in them.
Yes, I believe it, but I am just, I am so humbled. Because every time you talk, even when I read your thesis statements on Facebook,
wow, that thesis statements,
I love it. Wow. I love it though. Sometimes I have to dissect those chapters. I'm like, okay, I want to finish reading this at breakfast, and then I got a little in time between lunch and dinner. But I always, but I always feel better when I read your story, because not only did I hear you, I saw you.
Amen.
And I think that's the most important thing, is that we had, like you said, when you are present, see them. And so whenever you are sharing your story, or just even a word, I hear you, but I saw you.
Amen.
And that's important, because we get so glossy. People like, you can't see me, or people try to, see over folks, or try to get around that, or get underneath it. And that's the same thing with grief. People try to suppress it, get around it, get over it. You can't. You have to go through it and understand that as many layers as it is, what is clearly evident in what you're saying is that you have to be planted firmly in your faith, in your walk, through all of it.
Yeah.
And like you said, that night can be a long night.
Yeah.
In that season. And there may be bursts of joys here and there, so they do exist, but that season could still be long.
Right.
But that joy is coming. And I think we need to just be attentive that there is a difference between having peace and joy.
Yeah.
You and I both know a lot of people say, I'm at peace, but I'm like, but do you have joy? Because when you have that joy, you don't ever have to sit there and say, you don't necessarily have to say you have peace, because that joy is evident.
Yeah.
So we still working through that. But I'm just, like I said, I love you so much
I
for
love you
just
too.
continuing to be a mentor to me on this side, because
Oh. Girl, thank you. Yeah.
you are a truly, truly anointed.
Listen.
You listen, look, you are, I'm giving you the flowers to you now, because I'm giving you your flowers, because again, and it's not just me. I'm telling you that right now. There are so many people from when we went to school. You may not be aware of how much you have so helped a lot of us classmates when we've lost our classmates. We've lost a lot of people we went to school with these last couple of years, and that's been rough. And Lord knows, even when we get word, that you dealing your own, you're dealing your own battles, and then we collectively come together to make sure that the Lord understands. Look, we know she's anointed. We know she's your girl. We know.
But let us stay, Lord.
But
we
come on, come on. Let us still be in the presence.
I'm grateful
of this angel of walking testimony on faith, because just looking at you for a brief second, even the smallest of that of a mustard seed can light us up.
I am eternally grateful to all of you. I really am. I'm eternally grateful for every prayer that has helped keep me alive for the last several years. I don't take it for granted whatsoever. I'm able to smile and have joy because God has been faithful, and we are yet holding on. But and I thank you for everything that you have typed to me and for being a listening ear for the last week of my life. You know what I'm privately dealing with that others don't. And just the ability to word vomit and get it off of me, because it's been so heavy. And like I said, it's uncharted territory, this level of what we're dealing with. But just being able to share safely with you has been a tremendous blessing for me. And I mean, some of the closest people to me do not know. But God was like, I was able to share it with you and be honest with you about where I was and what was going on. And I don't take that lightly at all. I mean, the last time I was able to share it with you, I was able to sleep. And that meant something to me that I had peace enough that I could sleep. So, so thank you for what you're doing and for this thing about grief, because you do know a lot of, my journey, because I have posted a lot of it on social media. So grief has hit our lives in a whole lot of different ways, a whole lot of different ways. So just by what you're doing, I'm watching, I'm listening to your podcast. I'm going back and re-listening to the ones that I didn't hear before or whatever, and picking up nuggets from previous people that can help me with stuff that we've had to deal with and stuff that I yet have to face. So I'm girding myself up for the journey.
Listen, I'm very humbled, and I'm just thankful that I was at the right place at the right time, because I know I could not have gone through or still go through what I am dealing with if it wasn't for somebody who had safe space for me. And I think it's just important that we need to have these conversations out in the open, because it's too big for us to carry behind closed doors on our shoulders by ourselves.
And I told you, when it's over, call me back.
Look, We
When
will
when
we will talk.
when mine is over,
we will
I'll call you.
we will talk. We will talk. But
Mm-mm.
but you know what though? There's you know, again, I didn't want to do this, but you know, when I saw so many of us who are in these trenches, and I have to say you were one of them that prompted me to do this.
Amen. Amen.
On top of everything that I've been through,
Amen.
the fact that you were able to, I was like, her, him, you, we are in a different class of our experiences.
Yeah.
And I said, we need a safe place to talk.
Yeah.
We need a space for each other to talk. There's only so much we can talk at K-State about this teacher or what happened at that party.
Right.
There was
But
only
real
so much,
conversation.
right. We there's only so much we could talk about who hit the wrong note in that choir.
Now we might be able to talk about that for a while.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that in
Yeah.
a moment. But where we are now, we're having a whole nother level of conversations that we weren't really prepped for.
Oh, never prepped.
We were never prepped for this.
Right.
And even when, you know, when we think about those old conversations, our grandmothers or grandfathers like, I may not be here next year. This might, you know, be like, okay, you've been saying that for 20 years. Stop.
Right.
You know, and then you're still not prepared for it. You know, especially when you're close in relationships with your grandparents or your great aunties. But when it comes to your parents,
listen,
or your siblings,
listen,
or your spouses, or your classmates,
right,
or your children,
right,
that's a whole different level.
Yeah, it is.
And so we need a space to vocalize what it is we are feeling in the present moment and create a strong support system throughout it all.
Yeah.
Because none of us are going to leave here.
Right.
It's inevitable. It's just part of the journey. It doesn't mean we have to be alone on this journey. And that's what I need to convey. There's going to be times when that's a long night. There's going to be times when it's lonely. It's going to be moments when those dates mean something different to you.
Yeah. I
mean, my mother's birthday is on Wednesday, and it means something different to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, the support that we give each other makes it a little bit more bearable.
Yeah.
And I think that's just important. So
yeah.
But nevertheless, I love you.
I love you.
Again, thank you so much. We're gonna have a continuation down the road. I know we're going to talk again on a different level when it's time. Not I'm not a fortune teller. I ain't gonna say when or where, but there will be a time when.
No, I already told you.
Yeah, you did, but
I mean,
and I spoke, and we'll talk some more. But I could see that happening when it's ready, when it's ready to be executed in his time. In his time.
I agree.
But nevertheless, we're going to get through all of this together. And I'm, as much as you have been such a strong hold for your family, please know that you have me and you have so many other people who will be holding you too. We got you.
Because I told you, who said I was a strong one? I told you.
Listen, I look, a lot of people, but you know what? Those where that title is thrust upon your shoulders, those are the ones I hear for, because I'm like, okay, as strong as you are, I want to be strong for you.
Amen.
Yeah. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much again. my guest, Reverend Dr. Angela B. Smith Peoples.
Oh Lord.
The mother, the grandmother, the auntie, the mentor, the minister, the pastor, the big sister, the daughter of the Heavenly Father, all of these things. But to me, she's just Ange. I love you.
Amen.
I love
I
you.
love
I
you.
love you so much. And thank you all for joining us on this episode 16. We can't wait to hear your comments and support. You know, again, we're all on this journey together, maybe lonely at times, but it doesn't mean you have to be alone while you're walking it. We got you. I see you. More importantly, I hear you. So take care, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you for listening, being intentional, and sharing this moment with us. We at It's Not You, It's Grief deeply understand the many facets of grieving, and we want to make sure we can be here for you. Again, thank you for listening, and tune in again wherever you subscribe to podcasts. We look forward to seeing you next time. Be well.